Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at A Feast for Odin, which is a board game dating back to 2016. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes around 2 hours to play. So this is by very prolific designer Uwe Rosenberg, who is known for his farming kind of simulators. And this one is a massive sprawling game that's got a lot going on in more ways than one. So please do not use this video as a rules tutorial or anything like that, because no doubt I will be making some rules mistakes along the way. But before I get into my review for A Feast for Odin, I just want to give a shout out to kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer in the UK, where you can get some great games at some great prices. But let's get started on A Feast for Odin. Okay, so A Feast for Odin is a worker placement and tile placement style game with a hell of a lot going on here and a hell of a lot of table presence. So let's just talk about all the different things you'll see throughout the video. So you've got your individual player board here, which is kind of unique to you as a specific player, which holds all your different workers on them. It holds your little banquet table here, which is going to be used to feed workers throughout the game. And because the more people you have put on the board, the more people you're going to have to feed. So it has this nagging tension. We have to fill up these spots with different food. You've got your main kind of play area here as well, which you're going to use to place tiles on, not only to gain more income, because if you build these tiles in a certain direction, if you expose a certain amount of income, then you can get that much money. You've also got resources on here as well, where if you cover these perfectly or surround them, then you get that income in terms of rewards or resources. And you've also got all these spots here with -1 on them, as you can see, which means that if those aren't covered at the end of the game, then for each of those exposed, you're going to suffer a negative point, which is obviously not a good thing. And you've got some space here to put boats on. You've got some space here to put your livestock on. Each player is going to have a bunch of weapons as well that you can acquire throughout the game, and these bonus cards as well. And you've got the main worker placement board here, which has a ton of different spots on here. So as you can see, it's quite overwhelming. A lot of different symbology and different things. But I will say, as it's broken down, it's not as bad as it initially looks. But we'll talk about that in just a second. And you've got your resources here. So you've got your wood, your stone, your metal, and your coins. You've got these resource strips, which is going to be used to acquire these resources, where you can only take them from left to right, but they do get kind of depleted as the game goes on, and more of these strips come out. And you've got kind of a boat market here, where you can choose to buy boats if you don't want to build them by using worker placement spots. And you've got these additional tiles as well, these different islands that you can acquire, which will again give you more potential to get more income and more resources and more points. And you've got a ton of different resources here that come in these trays that actually come in the base box. So they're kind of broken into different tiers. You've got your, in fact, I've got these upside down. So if you have a look here, you've got your real basic kind of food resources here with these orange tokens, and then the next one up you've got the red tokens, then you've got the green tokens, and ultimately the blue tokens, and they are double-sided. So, and they kind of show the different rareness of the different items, and that not only goes upwards in the tiers, but also goes from left to right in their size. And of course, bigger is generally better, because you can fill up your boards a lot quicker and try to cover up all those negative points. You've also got a deck of weapon cards, which you can acquire each round. And you've got these different cards that you can acquire as well to give you bonuses. You've got a pair of dice here as well. You've got, I think it's a D8 and a D12. And you've got this little kind of blacksmith board here, which you can get these weird and wonderful different tiles to cover things up in weird shapes. And you've also got these additional buildings and farms that you can give you different points in different ways. So that pretty much covers all the different components. Let's talk about the actual gameplay. So the game's going to be broken into 12 phases and a number of rounds depending on the mode you've chosen. So this one here shows the short game, which only plays over 6 rounds, or you can play the more advanced version, or the full game, which plays over 7 rounds. But the only thing is it's a bit quicker. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take a new Viking and add it to your pool of Vikings to use this turn. So like that, for example. And this is going to show or expose a new block here, which can be a bit of a problem because it means that you need more food to fill up your banquet table. And then you're going to do a harvest, which means that you can take a number of different tiles, depending on the round it's on. So in the earlier rounds, you're only going to take number 1 harvest tiles. And then as the game goes on, you can potentially get the ones up to 3s. Which will give you more to play with, meaning that you have to spend fewer workers in order to acquire the food to feed your Vikings. And you've got the expedition boards here, which will get refreshed every few rounds, and they do actually acquire these this money on them, meaning that the longer that they are neglected, they're going to start building income on them, which means that when people take them, they also get the money on them. You've got the draw a new weapon phase, which is simple as it sounds. You just draw a weapon from the top of the deck here, and you've got different types of weapons. You've got bows and arrows, you've got spears, you've got swords as well, and you've also got traps. You've got the main action phase, which you're going to be using to deploy your workers on the board, which I'll talk about in a little bit. You've got the determined start player. Then you've got income, and you've got the animal breeding, because some of these spots allow you to take sheep and cows. And when you take the sheep and cows, you're going to end up putting them in your little pen here on your player board. So let's just say I had these 2 sheep here like this. When it comes to a breeding phase, because I've got 2 non-pregnant sheep, they will actually give birth to, first off, so they'll become pregnant like so, and when it comes to the next round, the pregnant sheep will actually give birth to another sheep. So these do actually multiply on each other naturally as time progresses. And the same applies to the cows, and they'll give you points accordingly. And then you've got the feast, which is when you're going to need to fill this banquet table up of the different foods. So I could do this, for example, and put the fish on there, and then I could maybe fill it up with some peas, like so. All trying to fill up these gaps here. However, you can only ever put one vertically of each colour, so you don't want to maybe waste the fish by going up like this, because it's not going to be as efficient. And as you can see here, all these different kind of grids have different restrictions on them. So this one shows that I can put orange and red tiles on them, and I can also put coal on them. The coins on them as well. However, the oranges can't touch oranges and reds can't touch reds. And just like on this one here, I can put on the greens and the blues. Blues can touch each other. The greens can touch corner to corner, but can't touch flush. You can cover things up with coins and so on. So again, all these different things have different restrictions which you need to abide by. And then you're going to take your bonuses, which means that you are going to get any resources depending on what you've covered. So again, if I've surrounded this block here, then I'll get one of these as a free income. And then you're going to update and add new mountain strips, which means that basically all the left side resources are going to get taken off these boards here, and then a new board is going to come on filled up with resources, so that you've got a different selection. Because when you take resources, you can only take from left to right, and you can't go straight in to the money, for example. And then finally, you're going to remove all your workers and get ready for the new round. But I suppose the main bulk of the game is going to be the action phase, which correlates to this bit here. So let's talk about all the different worker placement actions. So obviously I'm not going to go into every single spot individually, but I'll just give a general overview consensus. So basically these are divided into 4 different columns. So you've got the 1 worker column here, 2 workers, 3 workers and 4 workers. So in order to go to these more powerful spots on the right hand side, I'm going to have to spend a massive 4 workers to do so, which is obviously quite a big portion of my workforce. However, when you do these further 2 right actions here, so you've got the 3 or the 4 workers, you're either going to draw one of the bonus cards or actually get to play a bonus card. And they're going to let you do lots of different things, give you instant rewards, give you different things you can do throughout the game. Like, for example, my starting card here means that when it comes to the income phase, I can choose to spend one of these if I have one of these tiles. And if I do so, I'll get a coin for doing so. And there is a hell of a lot of different cards in this game. This is not even half of them. As you can probably imagine, there is a ton of variety there. So going through them is just not going to be an option for a video like this. But yeah, let's talk about all the different actual events or the different spots themselves. So you've got the ones here that let you spend resources to get these new tiles, which again will give you victory points, and hopefully you can cover up those negative spots to kind of bypass any forfeits you have to do. You've got ones here that let you build boats, so either one boat, so one of the little boats here for 1 wood, or maybe the bigger boats for more workers and 2 wood. And you can even do ones like this as well, which let you build all the different things as well. You've got the hunting spots here, which is kind of a big part of the game, which uses the weapons and the dice. So again, you can use 1, 2, 3 or 4 workers for doing so, which let you get all the kind of different whale meat, or you can get the all the different kind of pelts as well, which you can put on your player boards and cover things up. And the way the combat works is basically used on die rolls. So you're going to try and get to, or in these particular spots, you're going to try and get to 0. And by doing that, you're going to roll the relative die. So you're either going to roll the D12 or the D8. And when you roll it, you're going to have the opportunity to roll up to 3 times and trying to get as low as you can. However, you can mitigate things further by spending additional weapons or resources. So if I wanted to use this hunting one here, and I rolled a 2. If I got rid of 2 bow and arrows, or say a bow and arrow and a wood, I could actually take that down to a 0 and make that a successful hunt and get the corresponding resources, which of course can be used to fill up my board or even feed my banquet table. However, if I do fail a hunt, I actually get these as compensation. So I get an arrow or a wood, or in fact both of those as compensation. And even when you get to the more bigger spots here, you can actually take more workers back to use again, so that you aren't suffering such a penalty for not having a successful roll. So despite there being quite a significant luck factor in terms of, you know, just die rolling and top decking cards off the top of the deck, you do actually get compensated to build towards your next hunt if it doesn't go so well. You've got the livestock ones here, which will let you, again, kind of buy sheep and cows, ones that will let you buy fish by spending money, or buy different meat, ones here that let you buy one of each. You've got the market here, which lets you buy just like produce and stuff, so you can feed your Vikings. You've got the ones here that let you milk your cows, ones that get wool from your sheep, and so on. So you've got ones here that let you convert goods into other goods, and maybe you can convert like fabrics into clothing, which again will give you a lot more coverage of your player boards. You've even got the ones here that let you convert this metal into building these specific items as well. So if you take this particular action, then you can get one of these and add it to your player board, which will be a lot more kind of specific on where you can fit them and what shapes you can cover, etc. So they're a lot more kind of flexible in what you can do. You've got ones here again that convert kind of fabrics into cloth, or kind of smaller bits of metal into bigger, more elaborate pieces. You've got straight up taking resources, where you can take resources from the action strips here, always abiding to that left to right method. You've got upgrading spots, which when you get these upwards arrows, you are essentially choosing to upgrade resources. So I could say I had one of these tiles here, I could upgrade that to the one above it and take one of the fish instead and to replace it with. So these are really good for kind of cycling through the different goods and getting better and better upgrades. Or you can even do ones like this that will let you upgrade the same thing twice to really kind of up its value. You've got ones here, the raiding. So the raiding and pillaging basically work very similar to the hunting, except you're trying to get as high number as you can, again by rolling the dice and boosting it with swords or stones and other things. When you do that, you are looking at the value here and trying, you know, if you reach or exceed that value, then you can add that particular token to your player board to fill things up. And then you've got the ones that let you buy the buildings or the different islands here. I'm going to give you more opportunity to place things and fill things up. And you've got ones here that let you draw cards and play cards and things like that. So as you can see, you've got a lot of different options there on the worker placement board. Okay, so I don't want to go too much further on the rules themselves. I want to get into the actual review and my thoughts on the game, because I suppose that's what you're here for. So first off, as you can tell, this game is incredibly wide. There is a ton you can do. And this was one of the things that I was the most apprehensive about, because normally with worker placement games, and there are a few exceptions, I like games to be relatively tight, so that if people go to a certain spot, then the tension and the kind of race aspect to get to that spot is a lot stronger. Whereas in this one, if somebody takes a certain spot, then the chances are that you can go pretty much anywhere else and still have good options to fight for. So again, that's a double-edged sword here, because it does give you a plethora of different paths to victory and different things to try. However, some of the tension is certainly taken out in my perspective, because again, the game is so loose and it is so wide. I will say that I do like some of the gameplay elements in terms of the tile placement, because this is I think this is a really good part of the design, is that you can actually choose to kind of manipulate and move your tiles whenever you like. Obviously not when they're placed on the board locked in, but you're not kind of constrained to a particular round or phase or an action spot in order to place things onto your player board. You can do that whenever you like, which keeps the game moving along at a lot nicer pace and makes it feel a bit freer. And I think that certainly does help the game, rather than feeling so rigid and having to go to a particular spot to do that. So I do think that's pretty well done. There are some things here that I do think are quite unnecessary though. So for example, I'm not quite sure why the resource market has to be like this in terms of taking resources from the left to right. I understand that the rarer resources are to the right here, and you might have to wait a bit longer to get to them. However, because the game is so wide and there's so much going on, that I'm not sure if things like this really help the game at all. Even some disconnect in terms of it being such a heavy, involved and meaty game, that a lot of the things do come down to top decking. You do basically just draw a card of the weapon deck every round. And if it's not the weapon you want, then, that's not the best thing. And you might have to waste some workers and knowing that you're going to lose one of these hunts to get the compensation reward, which sometimes feels a little bit unsatisfying. Also, I think that some of the cards, there's such a wide, diverse amount of cards here, and there's absolutely hundreds of them. Sometimes they're going to work for you, sometimes they're not going to work for you, and it all comes back to top decking off that card when you take a particular action. So again, there's a little bit of a disconnect at times for me when some of the randomness is used, and I do understand that the designer wanted to add that sense of adventure into the game and that little bit of excitement, but for me it just has, again, that little bit of a disconnect. I do think some things in this game are done really well. Particularly, I like the animal breeding. I think this is quite a cool strategy to go for, and I like the way that as time progresses, if you have non-pregnant animals, they're going to keep breeding and breeding and breeding, and that can be a nice kind of place to go to. And of course, it's going to be correlating actions on the board in order to use those to your advantage by getting milk or by getting wool, etc. And this is kind of one of the things here. There are so many different paths to victory, so many different things to try. And it almost feels like there's more games, or kind of like several games here, almost sewn together rather than being so harmoniously intertwined. Because, again, I'm obviously this is a massively wide game, but I'm not sure that the depth to width ratio is quite there. You do have to pick and choose what you're going to do from round to round. And that kind of ties back to this sandbox nature of the game. And this sandbox nature is one of the most polarizing things about me for this game, because I know a lot of people will love it because, again, there are so many different things to try. Each time you play the game, you can try something different and go for a completely different strategy. However, for me, it leaves me feeling a bit kind of aimless and a bit goalless, and it doesn't just quite connect right when I'm kind of neglecting a whole portion of the game in order to do what I'm doing. And it just feels a bit weird for me, and most of the games I play don't have that element to them. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just thinking it's just very different to what I'm not used to playing, and without having at least a little bit of guidance and something to fight for, then I do feel a little bit lost at times. And certainly the first time I played this one, I did feel like, where the hell do I start here? What do I do? Where do I start? What am I building towards? And it's going to take a few plays to get your head around that in order to understand how everything kind of works together and what the kind of end game payoff is going to be. Now, obviously, despite being so massive in scope and things to try, I will say that once you do get the rules down and have it explained to you, or do the explaining yourself, the gameplay does work surprisingly smoothly. It's not actually too complicated in its actual gameplay. Yeah, there are a lot of different phases here, but most of them are relatively simple. Just take a new Viking, take your resources for the round. So they are actually pretty simple, and the actual gameplay and flow doesn't have too much rules minutiae and too much fiddliness. Because, again, everything in their own right is relatively simple, but it's just that width and kind of that initial kind of rules haul can be a bit much, and it is going to be a long teach. And if you haven't played it before and you're teaching it to all new people, then it's going to be probably a good half an hour teach. But once you have got the rules down, it does actually work surprisingly smoothly, and it certainly isn't too fiddly. I do think there's a good forward momentum in the game where each round you get a new Viking and add it to your pool to use. But that is kind of a double-edged sword, because as you place more workers down, you're going to create more gaps. And of course, these are going to get wiped, and you're going to have to feed all your workers again each round, which, to be honest, is something I'm not too keen on. I generally don't mind these kind of pressures in these type of games where you have to feed your workforce. But in this one, I don't really feel like it added much at all. And something I will say that I did like was the fact that some worker placement spots would allow you to convert boats into these tokens here, like so, which will not only give you victory points, but mean that you don't have to feed those Vikings anymore. So I did like that touch, and I thought that was quite a cool element to the game. But yeah, that was kind of another wrinkle to the game that I thought could have been taken out, and I didn't really add much to the fun or to the ultimate experience. So I'll just quickly go through some of the talking points of my review. So meaningful decision-wise, there is a ton to do here, and everything is going to kind of mean something and going to contribute to you being good at this game or not. So I do like the way that you have to weigh up how you're going to use the polyomino tiles. Are you going to take the income? Are you going to take the resources? Are you going to actually bite off more than you can chew by taking more and more spots here and hope that you can cover them up? Are you going to try and just completely cover up all these negative spots straight up? So yeah, there's a lot you can do here, and it adds a hell of a lot of depth to a lot of kind of meat around a very simple polyomino style game. And the fact that this is so meaty and it has so much going on, but the actual one of the crux of the of the game is polyominoes, is quite different, and it certainly is a change of pace. So yeah, meaningful decision wise, there's a hell of a lot to do, tons of different paths of victory. And it certainly is on the heavier end of the spectrum, not only in terms of rules, but in terms of decisions as well. The balance, despite the things being so well, diversified, lots of different things to try, I think the game is really well balanced. I couldn't really see a particularly strong or overpowered path to victory. It seemed like everything you got a fair shot of winning, depending on which route you take. So yeah, I've got no real issues with the balancing of the game or anything like that. I haven't played this a ton of times, and this is kind of more of an initial impressions review. But yeah, so I don't have an issue with the balancing or anything like that. Time investment, I do think the game goes on a bit too long. I have played this solo, and it still does it does feel like it takes too long, even for that player count. I don't really find myself being gripped, particularly as it goes for that kind of mid-game lull. I wasn't really overly enthused by how long the game takes. Like I said, the game box does say it takes up to 2 hours. I think that might be a little bit generous, and it'll probably take a bit longer than that if you're looking at that 3 or 4 player count, particularly if you're playing with people who haven't played the game before. Uptime is generally okay, because you can do a lot of this stuff in the admin when it is another player's turn. And I will say that I do, despite having a ton of workers at times, you can feel like you've got a hell of a lot of workers to get through. Bear in mind that some of these spots do actually require 4 Vikings, so you can get through that workforce pretty quickly, and you don't have as many options as you might think when you do have that whole army of Vikings at your disposal at the start of the round. Replayability, yeah, there is a ton to do here. Again, so many different strategies. You're not even going to scratch the surface in your first couple of plays. However, I will say that for me, once that sense of discovery was done, and I could see what all the different worker placement spots do and how they link together, then I will say that the enjoyment factor does start to diminish quite quickly. So for me, a lot of part of a game like this, and the fun to be had for a game like this, lies in that sense of discovery on what you can do and trying things out, where I think once that's done and out of my system, I don't really have a massive urge to go back to it and explore much further. Interaction, yeah, it's kind of, again, a double-edged sword, because despite having a ton of workers relating to a huge worker placement board, it does feel like it is a bit too loose, and you don't really think, if people grab a spot, you're not devastated, and taking first player and being first player isn't as big of a factor as it is with a lot of other worker placement games. You have got a good spot that you can go to as a kind of backup, and you've got lots of plan Bs you can go for if your plan A goes off the rails. So again, I think a lot of the tension and the player interaction is taken out of the game because it is so wide with so many options. Aesthetically, I think the game looks fine. I've got no issue at all with the production or anything like that. All the resources are good quality. All the iconography is generally good considering how much of it there is. So yeah, I've got no real issue with the production. I think the fact that the game comes with these trays to aid with the setup, etc., is a really good bonus. So I've got no criticisms there with the production or artwork. I'm generally happy with the way everything is put together from a physical perspective. And the setup and teardown time, despite being so huge, it's not actually that bad, because again, you do have these trays and stuff. Yeah, it's going to be longer than average, which you'd expect with a game of this magnitude. So yeah, it's not the best in terms of setup, but it's probably not as bad as it initially looks either. So, final thoughts on A Feast for Odin. So this is a really strange game to review, because while I can completely appreciate its design, its scope, its kind of just ambition and what it does, I will say that I don't think the game is for me personally, because again, I like the tension of a worker placement game to be a bit tighter. I think that there's a bit too much going on for me, and while I again, I do like the way that some of these things intermesh with each other. I do think it is a lot wider than it is deep. And I'm not sure that that actually helps the game as much as I would have liked it to. I do think that a good kind of 30% of this game could have been shaved off, and you could probably still have pretty much the exact same experience coming off the back of it. Now, I know that's going to be somewhat of a controversial thing to say, because I know this is an immensely popular game. And I certainly don't want this to sound like a negative review, because I did enjoy my games of A Feast for Odin. I think it's a really solid worker placement game, some good, interesting ideas here. However, is it going to be for me? I don't think so, because I do tend to like games being a bit more self-contained, being a bit quicker, being a bit easier to explain and less kind of front-heavy in terms of explaining this to somebody who hasn't played it before. I think it's just a bit too big and a bit too much going on for my personal tastes. I've actually yet to play an Uwe Rosenberg that I've fallen in love with, and I was actually quite optimistic that I was going to, this might have been the one, because not only because it was probably the most critically acclaimed, because I thought, reading the rules, I thought, this sounds really awesome. I love all the different things you can try, and it's in practice, yeah, it was good, but it just didn't have that special bit of magic that tends to hook me and keep me coming back. And as I said earlier, for me, a lot of the enjoyment that I got from A Feast for Odin was in the discovery, trying things out, just seeing how things worked, and now I've tried it all, I can't really see myself coming back to it. So yeah, unfortunately, this one hasn't really changed the tide in my Uwe Rosenberg appreciation. While I still do like the game, and I think it's a good design, certainly nothing wrong with it, but it's just one of those games that's not for me, because there's just too much going on, and I can't really see myself pulling this one off the shelf on top of other games that I just think are a bit more concise and a bit more streamlined and just ultimately a bit more fun for me. So yeah, unfortunately, again, not going to be a recommendation for me, but again, I don't want to make that sound overly negative, because there's a lot of great games out there that aren't for me either. So yeah, unfortunately, not going to be a massive recommendation for me. But hey, I'm still really appreciative that I'd got to play this one, and it's certainly another game off my bucket list that I wanted to try. So that's my final thoughts on A Feast for Odin. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you found it useful or at least somewhat entertaining, then please hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Additionally, if you wish to support the show, because I am a one-man operation and I don't get any support from publishers, then please consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/chairman of the board, where you can back for as little as £2 per month. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.